Welcome to Exit Algorithms, the podcast where we decode what it really takes to unlock growth, streamline operations, and prepare your business for a high value exit. I'm your host, Pete Vera, and today I'm joined by Ricky Ho, co founder and CEO of SourceReady, the AI powered sourcing platform called the ChatGPT for product sourcing. Ricky's a serial entrepreneur, has had already raised $22 million and sold his first supply chain tech company by age 23, and is also a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree. His latest venture, SourceReady, is growing like a weed and is already trusted by major Fortune 500 brands after just 2 years. So, Ricky, so excited to have you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pete. Excited to be on it.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive in here. For listeners that haven't heard of you before, do you mind sharing your background, where you're from, and how you got into this business?
Yeah, so I've been kind of working in the cross section of supply chain and technology for the past 9 years now. My family is also kind of in the manufacturing business, so I've always kind of grew up. I kind of grew up in this industry. I went to UC Berkeley for my undergrad. I dropped out my second year to start my first company. So I was 19 when I started my first company, Tree Lab. And at the time, basically, I just thought that kind of these legacy systems that a lot of these big companies use were like super hard to use. The kind of user satisfaction score was very low and the adoption rates were not very high. So we thought that there's a better way, a more modern way to kind of build a procurement and supplier collaboration system. And I think supply chain is one of those things where you don't really think about from day to day, but it's a huge impact on everyone's lives. And in my first company, we basically created software to help retailers better collaborate with their suppliers and manufacturers globally. And like even for very large companies that we worked with, despite spending millions of dollars on these ERP systems, most of the day-to-day supply chain data still lives in email and spreadsheets. So we sought to basically disrupt that market by creating a more flexible, collaborative kind of platform where not only can kind of your internal data be within the platform, but also your external vendors as well. I did that for 5 years. I sold the company a year and a half ago, almost 2 years actually now. And yeah, I started SourceReady soon after. And yeah, now we're still kind of in the supply chain and sourcing space, except now we're more focused on kind of the supplier discovery space. So you can think of us as like a search engine for finding factories. And the pain point that we see is that a lot of brands and retailers are trying to find suppliers, especially outside of China, especially with the tariffs going on. And traditionally, that's just very difficult because a lot of suppliers and manufacturers have very little publicly available information online. And it's just very hard. Like, imagine you want to find a coffee supplier in Colombia. Like, a lot of these suppliers, you're not going to find a website. You're not going to find them on Google. So our goal is to like index the world supply chain data by, acquiring data from customs agencies, government agencies, trade shows, all these different data providers, and basically creating a better way for buyers to find the right supplier. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my background.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. Amazing story. I love that, dropped out of college to pursue a, you know, opportunity. It sounds like a lot like Mark Zuckerberg and several other famous tech entrepreneurs. So yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah. And
Awesome.
the attraction to the supply chain, same kind of thing for me. It's so vital to the economy. And it's often taken for granted. Huge opportunity. I love how you found the pain point and dove into it. Yeah, I'd love to talk about your first venture a little more in depth.
Yeah.
How was the process building that and eventually selling?
Yeah, so when I started the company, I didn't really like drop out right away. Initially, I was just taking kind of a break, and I wanted to see if we can build a project with some traction. And we built more traction than we had initially thought. And venture capital came to us and said, if you're willing to kind of build this into a company, obviously, like they'll be willing to back us. And that gave me the confidence to kind of drop out to do it for full time. But there's obviously like ups and downs of the business. I was like 19 at the time. I didn't know how to manage a team. We pivoted a couple times here and there, trying to find the right customer fit, the right product fit. But I think overall it was like a great experience. Like at our peak, we had close to 100 people in the company. We worked with some of the largest brands and retailers in the world. And I learned a lot, how to manage large teams, how to hire, how to kind of build a good enterprise product. And kind of one of the things you learn is that I was when I started the business, my initial thesis was like user experience is like the thing that will be the differentiating factor because
Mm.
like the traditional legacy systems were just so hard to use. But reality kicked in that, to be honest, like the user at these big companies aren't really the decision makers or what tools or what systems to buy. So like the sales process is actually a lot more complex than you would think. Like it's not like where you can just like say, hey, trial this thing. If you like it, buy it, right? Because the user that uses it is not the guy that decides what software to buy. So there's a lot of learnings on how to build a sales organization, how to position the product from the perspective of how the key decision maker will think about it, not just at the end user level. And that's actually one of the motivations why I ended up selling the company was because with enterprise products, it's very hard to build a product-led motion for growth. What I mean by that is like if you use a product like Zoom or Google Docs or Notion or these kind of collaborative tools, most of the time the end user is a decision maker. The user is the person that decides whether they want to buy it. But for like B2B enterprise, the end user and the decision maker are oftentimes very far away from each other. And because of that, the product really is not that important. Product is like maybe 30% of the decision making. Like 70% is like, how do you build trust with the customer? Is your company reputable? Are other logos or customers that they know using it? It's more about building that trust and validation, which I think is like great. But I personally I'm a big fan of like building great user experiences. So
Yeah.
ultimately, like that was why I decided to sell the company because I wanted to go into a line of business where I can actually serve the end user. Um, and yeah, so that was my motivation for selling and starting SourceReady.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you use all those lessons to further your career in other ventures later on. Um, yeah, I'd love to talk about were there any difficulties in the sale process or things that you may have wished you'd done differently?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, like we initially when we were trying to sell our kind of so what our system did was we basically helped onboard all of their global vendors. And then we basically created this like tool where they can collaborate in our platform. So you can imagine like before a lot of these large retailers, most of the day-to-day supply chain is not in their ERP. It's like in different emails and spreadsheets.
Mm.
And it's just very hard to understand where a particular order is or if there's any like, for example, delays, like whether that delay is being like handled. So we basically created systems to help like better create visibility in the supply chain. And our initial thesis or like proposition to customers was like, hey, like we can replace your current way of doing things. You can convince your supplier to use our platform to collaborate. But ultimately, like that hit some roadblocks because for a lot of these companies, they actually couldn't even convince their suppliers to join the platform to collaborate with them. Then there was like an adoption issue. So then we actually had to think about like, okay, how do we like not change the way they're doing things, but still make an improvement? And ultimately, we came across the idea of like integrating with their email, so they can still do what they currently do. They still communicate over email, and the suppliers don't have to log into any system. But we will like pull data directly from their email to create insights and automate that workflow. So that's like one example of like I guess a product insight that we had. And then I think from a sales perspective, to be honest with you, like supply chain software, especially if you're selling to kind of these larger enterprises, it's a very complex decision making process, and it's not
Mm.
something that a company will very like like the sales process for us took like 7, 8 months per customer. It just takes a long time because
Wow.
you have to get a lot of people on board. You have to get the IT person on board, the chief supply chain officer, oftentimes a CFO. And because of that, you kind of have to navigate your way through like the different organizations and like who reports to who is the decision making here, who's the champion, who is kind of like the guy that's kind of against it. How do you convince him to not be against it? So there's a lot of relationship and like kind of sales pitching that you have to do across these different stakeholders.
Gotcha. Yeah, change management, right?
Yep, exactly.
And yeah, when you built the company, did you have someone that was running the day to day, or because you said it built it up to 100 people? How did you go about finding the right people to carry the business forward when you exited?
So I had a chief of staff. She did like all the ops of the company, but I don't think like for a tech company, we're pretty flat in terms of like the reporting line. Like I knew everyone knew me. Like we weren't at the size where I think operations or management was our biggest problem. And actually, like our culture. Like I think the term like culture eats strategy for breakfast. Like if you have a good company culture, and you hire the right people, there's actually not that much management overhead, at least when the company is small. So we weren't like, if we were like 1,000 people, that'd be a different story. But I think one of our challenges was actually finding the right customer fit and the right product strategy. That took us a while. That took us like almost 2.5, 3 years. We changed directions multiple times. Like we were always doing this, the big direction never changed. But like we initially said, okay, let's target like mid-sized companies. And then we pivoted. We're like, oh, let's only have to go after the large companies. And then the large companies, the sales cycles were taking so long, and then we're like, okay, should we actually target the? And then there were like a lot of back and forth, and I think that's part of the challenge of doing enterprise software. It's like your validation cycle is actually quite long because if you can imagine, like it takes like 6 to 9 months to close a deal, right? So
Yeah.
if you make the wrong decision on the direction, you don't realize that until like 6 to 9 months later, which is like a long time for a startup. So I think one of the lessons there is like you almost don't want to be too rushed on the like scaling the company. Like I think that's also one of the negatives of raising too much money too early on. It's because you have investors, you have the pressure to deliver revenue, you have the pressure to like show traction. You kind of have to like hastily move things along, even though you're not like you didn't think things through or didn't have like the full understanding of the market yet. So I think like this time around, I think it's like you want to be slow and then really, really fast. And when I mean slow, I don't mean like intentionally slow, but deliberate in the strategy and understanding the market very well before scaling your team, before like hiring a bunch of
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of startups make that mistake. First time founders make that mistake. A lot of it is also ego. It's like, oh, look, I have so many employees. Oh, look, the company is growing. But like these are all vanity metrics. Like what ultimately matters is like, is your revenue growing fast? Is your customer growing fast? And I think, yeah, like I think we scaled a little too early before we were ready, and that caused some amount of like time wasted on the wrong direction. And it's like once the ship
Mm.
gets big, turning directions is hard. It's like imagine you have like 20 salespeople, and then like 2 months ago you told them go after these customers, and then now maybe you're reflecting, you're like, oh crap, like maybe we should go after them. Like it's really uncomfortable telling all these salespeople, be like, oh no, no, I'm sorry, like we actually want to go after this instead. So it's like but if you only have like two people, right? I could literally have a meeting and say, okay, let's just try this instead, right? It's like so that this is why like a lot of times startups, when you're small, you can actually move faster, ironically, because when your organization gets big, pivoting and changing directions just becomes more complicated. So yeah, so that's something I would say is definitely a learning for me.
Yeah. Wow. Great insight. I love that analogy. Makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah. And then so with SourceReady, I was reading a bit about it, and I really love the business. Can you explain a little bit, maybe some advice you'd give business owners on approaching supplier selection?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. Alibaba is kind of the website or platform that a lot of small businesses use to find suppliers, which I think is fine. But I think the challenge with kind of the existing way people find suppliers is that number one, it's very hard to tell what's real and what's not. So a lot of these supplier directories, they make the majority of their revenue from supplier advertising. So when you search on Alibaba, like I want to find a t-shirt factory, right? The list of suppliers that show up on the first page are not necessarily the suppliers that are the most reputable or the best suppliers. They're the suppliers that pay the most money to rank on the first page. And this is why for a lot of
Mm.
first time people sourcing for the first time, they'll like get ripped off or get bad quality products or this is a very common situation with people. So I think one of the things that I would say is vet them, and the way you would vet them, there's two ways. One, the expensive and the hard way is like hire an agent in China or somewhere at the location and like make sure they visit the factory, they're real, make sure that you see the factory floor and make samples before. That's one way. And then the other way is like part of the thing that we do is that we use customs data to basically
Mm.
validate what customers the supplier currently works with. And that's a great way to just understand the customer profile. So if you look at a supplier and you say, okay, what are the majority of customers are working with? If you know that a supplier works with a reputable brand, then most likely the supplier are going to have the right quality and compliance requirements in place, right? So if you know the supplier already works with, let's say Lululemon or some reputable brand, that tells you a lot about this supplier. So I think like that's one thing, and then the second thing is diversification of the supply chain, building resilience. So China obviously is kind of like the place that most people just go to for everythuging,
'Cause
but
it's
I think
cost effective.
It's cost effective, and China's just a powerhouse in making everything. But I do think that for brands that are scaling, so like obviously if you're really small, I think China's great. But once you get to a certain size, you do want to build some amount of resilience in your supply chain by diversifying your supplier base to multiple countries. Because, like either it's tariffs or geopolitical situations or even COVID, it showed us that like you don't want one disruption in the supply chain to cause your entire inventory or your cost economics to break down. So it's important to say, okay, for the same category, I'm going to have a vendor in Vietnam, I'm going to have a vendor in China, I might have a vendor in Mexico or wherever, and that resilience will pay back in the long term.
Yeah, wow, that's great advice. I was actually going to ask you about that, trying to build resilience in the supply chain. That makes sense. Diversify, just like when you're in your investments, you wouldn't want to have all your eggs in one basket. You want to have a few different, baskets that you can fall upon if one fails.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Um, and does that mindset on on sourcing change as a business grows, say from a very young startup to as they grow and scale, beyond 10 million revenue and hit those benchmarks.
Yeah, of course it changes. So like you have more leverage. What I mean by leverage is like a lot of the really good manufacturers, they have very high minimums. Like if you approach a Lululemon factory and you tell them I'm going to order 50 pieces, like they're not even going to reply you. It's just too small. But if you're doing like 10 million revenue, then you have scale and you can negotiate with these suppliers and you can actually start going up the supply going to the more kind of reputable suppliers, because then you can say, I'm gonna order 100,000 yoga leggings, and they're definitely gonna be interested. So I think that's one of the benefits of being able to scale up your operations. Yeah, so that's I guess one difference that you would have.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Do you see businesses kind of try to take, or other common mistakes you see businesses make as they
In the supply chain.
yeah, in the supply chain?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ones, like, as I mentioned, getting too comfortable with existing suppliers and not kind of exploring the broader market to look for alternatives or doing it too late, right? It's like, yes, maybe the supplier was great when you were doing 500,000 revenue, but are they still the best supplier when you're at 3 million? Are there better alternatives out there? Are there better price points out there? Are there better quality? So I think the always be on the lookout for new opportunities. That's number one. And then number two is looking at supply chain as an end-to-end cost optimization and not just the final production costs. I think people get too like caught up on the kind of FOB cost or like the cost out of the door, but if you look at supply chain, there's a lot of hidden costs. So you have the cost of time. What I mean by that is if you're ordering from Asia, like China or Vietnam, it's going to take 12 days on a ship to get over here. But if you source out of like, let's say Mexico, despite on average having a higher production cost because it's just less efficient there, your time to a US warehouse might be like 2 days by truck or 3 days by truck, depending on where you are. And that 12 to 3 day change could actually reduce your cost because now you're able to do kind of these fast turnarounds. So instead of ordering a huge amount of product beforehand and holding that inventory, I can order a smaller amount of product and quickly replenish as my sales validate the product. So there's a lot of kind of nuances with the supply chain optimization, right? It's like, yes, if you know that this product has really like consistent demand, yeah, you can order this bulk load ahead of time from Asia and ship it over a ship. But if there's like new products that you're launching or products where you require a certain amount of agility, then you should think about supply chain as like even if you find a US manufacturer, for example, for certain products, yes, they're going to be more expensive, but hey, you're able to like do this quick replenishment and you're able to get this agility from it. So I think that's like one thing. And then also like obviously the tariffs and stuff. It's like understanding what are ways you can game the system legally. So I'll give an example. Like if you look at like a product like this, depending on the composition, the tariff that you pay could be very, very different. So if it's like majority was like cotton based versus polyester, polyester is like synthetic material. Typically, if you look at like a country like Vietnam or China, US are going to have on average a higher tariff rate for synthetic material simply because the US wants to protect its like chemical industry. So if your product is made of like nylon, 70% nylon or like polyester, you're going to be paying upwards of like 30% tariffs. But
Mm,
if you made that composition like 30% nylon, 70% cotton, where it's like majority cotton, then you can classify that as under a different HS code and kind of avoid tariffs that way. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the product without making huge changes to navigate this like tariff situation. And I think that's like also something that AI can really help with. It's like have AI analyze all the current tariff rates and say, okay, what changes can I make to my product to lower my tariff rate? Or what countries should I be sourcing out of if I were to try to find a lower tariff rate country or something like that?
Got it. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's a brilliant use case. I love that. Yeah, AI is a big theme of this podcast also. I was curious how, obviously SourceReady is it seems that it had AI in mind from the get-go. Is that
Correct.
yeah, how did you build that? Do you have yourself, software background, or do you have a team that helped you with that?
Yeah, my co-founder, he worked on AI before AI was cool, like 12, 10 years ago. So he's been kind of working on machine learning and AI for a long time. I would say that it's very obvious to me that like the tasks in which humans are good at are ironically things that AI are not, which are like very nuanced, experience-driven, high-stake decisions. So like I don't think AI today can actually negotiate with suppliers effectively. Like I think that's a very
Mm,
human thing. But what AI is good at, ironically, is where humans are actually very bad at. So looking at large volumes of data and finding patterns. That is something that AI is just like a superhuman. Like it's way better than a human. Even if you had a empire state building worth of people doing the same job, AI will probably do it better and faster. So I'll give you an example. Like let's say I gave you a question of find me a supplier with a particular certification, and I want the supplier to have worked with this type of customer, and I want the supplier to have a revenue range between this and this, and I also want the supplier to have experience doing this specific like construction. And you have to look at millions of suppliers to find the best supplier in the world that matches your four requirements. As a human, you're only going to have the mental capacity to maybe like look at a small sample set of all the suppliers in the world, and maybe out of luck you happen to come across some supplier that matches your four requirements. But AI is not like that. I could literally throw the world supplier database into AI and say, hey, look at all this supplier and find me the best supplier that matches my specific four requirements. So it's kind of like a search problem. Like, Google search is basically an AI product. It's a machine learning search engine, right? So like when I type in a keyword, in a matter of milliseconds, it can surface the best websites or links. The same is for like finding suppliers, right? Like I have a list of requirements that I have, and I need to find the best factories in the world, considering tariffs, considering my personal requirements, considering all these factors, and ranking the best suppliers, from top to down. Even if I gave
mm,
you 1,000 people working 24/7, you can't even look at all the suppliers if I give you a year. So, but AI
yeah.
AI can do that in 20 seconds. So I think this is where the co-pilot idea comes, where it's like, yeah,
Mm,
the AI is never going to replace the professional sourcing person because you have a lot of experience that the AI does not have. However, it can supercharge and make you a superhuman. It can let you do things that you otherwise would not have the ability to do. So I think that's the relationship that AI, can really help with.
absolutely. Yeah. So it amplifies your abilities rather than, completely replace. Right.
Exactly.
And that makes a lot of sense, compressing data, analyzing data. Are there any other use cases that you find yourself using AI on a daily or weekly basis?
Well, personally, I mean, I use AI every day. Like, I don't think I could work without AI. Everything from like today, our podcast today is being recorded and being summarized with the AI note taker, right? I use AI for our internal meetings. I use AI to draft blogs. So our engineering team, I think the statistic is like 70% of all our code now is written by AI. So yeah, I think it's incredible. Like I think we should be grateful that we still have a job. Like I actually don't know what will happen in 5 years. Like I think where if the state of growth continues at this path, I do believe that a lot of white collar jobs, entry level jobs will be automated. But that's a different problem for the
Yeah,
economy.
that was going to be my next question is, where do you see it all going, affecting business from your perspective and supply chain especially?
Yeah, I do think that like supply chains are getting more complicated because of tariffs, because of all these situations. and the amount of people entering the supply chain as a career is actually not increasing. So I think that's a great thing where AI can come in. It's like you have a lot of additional work that people have to do, but not enough people to do it. So I think every organization needs to adopt AI to make your existing workforce more productive. However, I do think humans need to go up the value chain on the types of tasks they're doing. So, like, instead of spending weeks trying to find supply information at trade shows or going to Alibaba looking for these information, like, I think that type of work will never be done by humans ever again. Like, that is just work that AI will do. And then, but what will the human do? Well, the human, you're going to focus on building supply relationships. You're going to focus on negotiation. You're going to focus on potentially supply chain strategy, understanding what are the pros and cons with different regions. I think that is where the human is still going to be in the loop in the short run. Um, so I think like you can think about AI as just like a crazy automation engine, right? The type of work that will be automated in the supply chain are data heavy, relatively repetitive, pattern recognition work. And I
Mhm.
think that type of work humans will never do again. However, the work that AI cannot do that will still require experienced sourcing and supply chain people are things like relationships, understanding the nuances of the pros and cons of different decisions, and strategic level things. So I think that's what I believe.
Yeah. I think that that has a lot of there's a lot of data to back to what you just said. Great insights, Ricky. Thank you. Yeah, I love to learn about how you structure your day. You know, you get so much done and built some incredible companies. Do you mind sharing some of your secrets to your work week?
I mean, to be honest with you, it differs week to week. But I do think that like one thing that's important is understanding like what is the like every week I would put down like what is the P0 priority of this week? Like what do I have to get done? Because the problem with running a company is that every problem is your problem. Like you're gonna have like all types of tasks that come your way. You know, you're gonna have product problems, sales problems, strategy problems, fundraising problems. You kind of want to stay focused and solve one critical issue at a time. And I think that like tunnel vision almost is very important. That's how you become productive. Right? Like if you look at great CEOs, you know, everyone only has the same amount of hours in a day, but like why can Elon Musk run these companies? It's because he has a great way of delegating certain tasks to other people. And then for the tasks that he needs to focus on, he's like locked in and he just like gets those tasks done. Right. So I think you don't want to get into a scenario where like you feel very busy, but you're not actually that productive. Like I
Mm,
think I see that with a lot of like founders where like their calendar is like fully booked, but like is the company actually improving and moving along week to week? Because you could just be doing a lot of busy work that actually you shouldn't even be doing it. Like this should not be the work for the CEO. Like you should be delegating this, and you should be focusing on what is the work that only you can do. No one else in the company can do. If this type of work is something that someone else can do, I'm not saying you delegate everything, but like you eventually want to get to a point where you build a system where your job is to solve the hardest problems of the company that only you can solve. And then for the tasks that are, I wouldn't say not hard, but the tasks that can just be repeated or can be executed, you want to find the best person to kind of execute on that. So I think that's one thing that I learned is like for me right now, for example, a product activation is my number one priority. Like, how do we get users from sign up to activation? That is where I spend the majority of my time, and then also like enterprise sales, closing these big logos. So every day, like every week, I think about what are the top three things that I need to get done this week to help move those two things along. And you're gonna have other things come your way. Like I'm not saying like I don't do anything else, but it's like you kind of like an 80-20 split.
mm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, figuring out what's signal, what's noise, and doing the most important thing.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, measuring, maybe not necessarily having a strict calendar, but focusing on the output. What are you getting done in the
Yeah.
day?
Yeah. Yeah, just don't get, hung up in busy work, like, yeah, I think part of it honestly is also, like, at least for me, when I was running my first company, you almost want to feel busy because you feel productive, you feel like, "Wow, I did a lot," but productivity is not measured by time spent. Productivity is measured by number of valuable actions that you've taken that move the company along. So great CEOs make very few but very good high quality decisions. And then bad CEOs make a lot of fast paced, not like a lot of small decisions that are bad. So I think like that is an insight that I've basically taken.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know we're coming up on time here, Ricky, but I always ask at the end of the show, what's one practical tip business owners could implement this week?
I think use AI. I think if you're not using AI in every function of your business, you are missing out. Like, think about AI as a way to run your company at a scale with less people, right? It's like if there's a marketing function that today takes you 10 hours, can AI make that into either 2 hours or five extra output with the same amount of time? Or and same with supply chain and sourcing, right? Like if you can use AI to help you find the best supplier, why are you doing this manually? So I think that's I mean, from us, like, we're a company of 8 people. If we didn't have AI to do what we are currently doing, I think we would probably need 3 to 4x the amount of people, maybe even more.
Mm,
So yeah, I think people are too skeptical on AI. Like I think people kind of, I know a lot of people that are like, oh, AI is not reliable. The answers are not good. Hallucinates. But guess what? Like humans hallucinate too. You hallucinate. If you hire someone, they can hallucinate. So I think of AI as a tool, but it's like the biggest change of the century. And if you're not like fully on board on it, I think you're missing out.
yeah, 100%. I think AI or die at this point. You got to be using it at least at some level, or else you risk being left behind. Oh, great tips. Ricky, it's been a great conversation today. Really appreciate your insights. I just wanted to give you the floor also to plug SourceReady, and also where can listeners find you easiest?
Yeah, they can go to my LinkedIn, search Ricky Ho, SourceReady. Happy to connect with anyone. I post a lot of supply chain insights and interesting kind of facts. And then if anyone is trying to source products, find suppliers, especially ones outside of China, you can go to our website, sourceready.com. It's completely free to use. So for any businesses that are like trying to find new suppliers, I think this could be a great resource.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll leave that in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.